Spider-Man Miles Morales releases 6 days from now. This is Insomniac's highly anticipated spin-off to their original Spidey title, which released in 2018. And while there's been a lot of anticipation for this follow-up, there's also been a lot of questions from fans regarding the length of the game, as well as the content therein. And the developers gave us a bit of an idea comparing the title to Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, and reminding us that this would be shorter and have less content than the original game, but there would also be improvements in graphics and gameplay and other elements, and that it would follow a full narrative arc for Miles. With that said, that's still a little bit vague, but reviews for Spider-Man Miles Morales dropped this morning from IGN, GameSpot, and pretty much every other major gaming news outlet, and this has given us a very good idea of what the length and content of this game will be, and I would like to break that down for you guys. The first thing that I'm happy to report is that most people who have played this game seem to either like it or love it. This game is getting mostly 9s and 8s across the board, occasionally perhaps pulling in a higher score, sometimes pulling in a slightly lower score from an outlet like GameSpot, but I'll be honest, I'm having a really hard time taking GameSpot's review seriously.
The way he leaps off of rooftops and flips backwards to face the camera before falling into a headfirst dive is just full of the exaggerated swagger of a black teen.
Yeah, I don't remember who wrote or narrated that one, but that one seriously needed a second draft. There were a lot of really odd takes and criticisms in that review. Maybe he just needed to explain them better. I don't know what it was. I personally felt that that was a tone-deaf review, and like I said, I'm having a hard time taking it seriously. But like I mentioned, across the board, this game is getting 8s and 9s, which is a really good sign. Unsurprisingly, like the last time around, this game's story is being praised for being fun, emotional, inspiring, impactful, and I cannot wait to experience that. This year has been so ridiculously heavy for so many of us that I think it's just going to be a breath of fresh air to kick off the holidays with a game that we can all have fun talking about, something that's a little bit more positive, and something that's a little bit more inspiring than a lot of what we've experienced in the events of this year. In addition to that, it sounds like they have done a great job honoring Miles' heritage, which is pivotal to his character development, and that character development is another element of this game that critics are praising very heavily. Another thing that I'll add is that though I haven't been spoiled, I don't know how the game ends, I have heard from these reviews that it does a great job of setting up the second main installment in this series, and that it gets you really excited for where this franchise is going in future installments that we'll probably see fairly soon. Give it a few years because these games are getting huge. They're getting ridiculously hard to make, but I'm really excited for the future of this franchise from a narrative perspective. The presentation of this experience, including the graphics and audio, is also getting a lot of attention, particularly on the PlayStation 5. The new character models, the ray tracing capabilities, and the particle systems for the snow and everything are getting people really excited, and it appears to be a really great stepping stone into the next generation of consoles. But I also deeply applaud Insomniac for making this game available also on the PlayStation 4, seeing as how the launch of the PlayStation 5 was such a disaster that most of us won't even be able to get a PlayStation 5 for at least a few months, the foreseeable future. It will be nice that we can still experience this game without having been able to pre-order the PlayStation 5. But the graphics of this game, again, unsurprisingly, the audio and the overall presentation are also getting a lot of attention. Based on our past experiences playing Insomniac games, both Spider-Man PS4 as well as their previous titles, I think that most of us probably expected the story and presentation and performance of this game to be very, very good. Another thing that Insomniac is well known for is their ability to create fun, engaging, and immersive gameplay, and it sounds as though Spider-Man Miles Morales is no different. If you are a fan of the traversal and combat of the original game, Miles Morales has only built upon that. Now, I will say that some critics have said that it's a little bit too similar for their liking, that they didn't really improve or innovate too much on that original game model, but seeing as how this is more of a spin-off than a full-on sequel, I'm willing to accept that. And the improvements that have been implemented sound fairly significant and honestly really fun. This ranges from Miles' combat, which now includes the Venom Blast ability and camouflage, which can put you back into stealth in the middle of combat, all the way to traversal, which now includes a skill-based rhythm element to the swinging that wasn't existent in the previous game. Once again, there doesn't seem to be any major improvements or variation in regards to the gameplay here, so if you liked the gameplay in the first game, you'll probably like it here, perhaps even a little bit better with those improvements. Those improvements may not seem too big, but I feel that they will go a long way. Adding these new tools to the player's arsenal will be a great way for them to expand their playstyle and to keep the combat and traversal fresh. Now let's talk about the topic that everybody seems the most concerned with, which is length. How long is this thing? Does it really justify being a full standalone experience, or should it have been an expansion to the base game? This is a question that has been on everyone's mind since it was announced that it was a spin-off rather than a full sequel. And having read a lot of reports on how long the game is, I honestly still don't really know. I've seen some report it as being about as short as 8 hours, and I've seen some outlets reporting that it's closer to 15 hours. My guess is that those who are reporting higher numbers probably participated in more of the side activities, probably explored a bit more, and the people who are reporting very short, brief numbers are probably people who rushed through the main story. Now, I haven't experienced the game, so I can't confirm that, but that would be my guess on why there is such a wide range of numbers. I've already started seeing some negative reactions to the length and quantity of content in this title, but personally, this was about what I was expecting. They've been promising us from the beginning that this was a spin-off with a scope akin to Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, and so this is about what I expected. I kept crossing my fingers that maybe it would be slightly longer, but as I've looked back and really considered the length of this game versus the length of Spider-Man PS4 and games like Batman Arkham Knight and even Arkham City, I've really started to recognize, at least for my own personal opinion, that length is really only one attribute to the quality of a game, and it can be mishandled. For example, I love both Batman Arkham Knight and Spider-Man PS4, but to an extent, I feel that they're a lot longer than the content justifies. Spider-Man PS4 and Batman Arkham Knight have a lot of side missions that really lack much importance, and both of them have moments in their campaign that I feel lag a little bit in the pacing. And those are nitpicks rather than direct criticisms. Like I mentioned, I love both of those games to death, but if I am nitpicking, I feel that both of them perhaps could have been cut down a little bit, or maybe given slightly more interesting subplots. In fact, I feel like that's actually what the length of a story should be dictated by. It should be dictated by the amount of quality storytelling that you have to offer. For example, if you have a story that's really long, that has a lot of character beats to get through, that needs a lot of time to mature to get through the entirety of the arc, don't cut it down. Keep it where it needs to be. Let us linger on those moments. Personally, I really resonated with The Last of Us Part 2, and I feel like if the game had been significantly shorter, that could have taken my enjoyment out of it. In comparison, Batman Arkham Knight, I personally felt was less interesting than Batman Arkham City because I felt that the story was less complex and less full of content, but it was like twice as long. And we can start to see that comparison. This isn't to say, again, that Batman Arkham Knight is a bad game, because I don't think it is. I just felt that the pacing was off in the campaign, and there were a lot of side missions that I felt were rather inconsequential. In other words, if your story isn't complex enough to justify a super long runtime, don't stretch it out. Again, I'm not hating on any of the games here. This is definitely just nitpicks, but it's the reason that I still prefer Batman Arkham City, is that even though it's a shorter experience, I have a smile on my face, and it's very replayable because I don't feel like I'm sitting through boring moments. I feel like I'm getting to the meat of the story very quickly, and I think that Miles Morales could be a very similar situation. And if we're being honest, this is really only a disappointing length if we're comparing to the last Spider-Man game. If we look back any further, this game will be about the same scale and scope as the first 3 Arkham games, or any of the previous Spider-Man games before Spider-Man PS4. I mean, look at Spider-Man 2. That is still considered by some to be the best Spider-Man game of all time, and you could play that one in one sitting. The same goes for Ultimate Spider-Man or The Amazing Spider-Man, and what we have to remember is that Spider-Man Miles Morales is being developed by Insomniac, so it will be of the same scale as those previous entries in the Spider-Man franchise, or of those first 3 entries in the Arkham franchise, and yet they will be of the quality of Spider-Man PS4. I personally think that the shorter runtime might be a little bit better paced than that first game, and when they get to the second game, I'm not saying that I want them to cut it down. I'm saying that perhaps they could justify the length better with more compelling characters and subplots and situations to engage in. Get rid of those horrible MJ and Miles missions. But I'm just saying that for this experience, for what it's worth, for what it's priced at, I think that the runtime is very fair, and I feel that it could be paced a lot better. The creative director Brian Horton said that this game would have a satisfying length, and from what I've seen, I think that he's probably right. I'll definitely have to give my final verdict once I play the game, but I don't think that we'll necessarily be feeling like we were robbed of time with this game. I think it's probably set right at where it needs to be for the amount of content that it has to offer, and I would always rather have a game that's shorter but very full of quality rather than a game that is mediocre and 40 hours to complete. So I'm definitely excited to pick up Miles Morales next week, and I'd be curious to know if you guys are planning on picking it up as well. Please be sure to let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and please be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. We'll see you guys in the next one.